Welcome to Breakthrough Conversations with Coach Pete, and I'm Gloria Lybecker. And we were just talking about who's the giver and who's the receiver. And I learned a little thing once upon a time years ago about salt and pepper. So if you're sitting around a family dinner table and somebody says, "Excuse me, can you pass me the salt and pepper?" It's like there's an exchange that happens. You can make a request and then somebody can respond to it. And then maybe you pass it back. So it's like, well, who's the giver and who's the receiver? And for me, in my experience, I have experienced the more I give away, the more I receive. Um, and sometimes we meet people that they want to receive, 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 and they don't want to give. And then there's other people that they just give and give and give and give, but oh no, they cannot receive anything. And there's that spectrum of life. There's so many different ways that we can show up, but what's one of your experiences around that giving and receiving, that exchange of the energy between people?
Yeah, well, I find it really interesting what you're saying, and I need to process it myself and think about it. I like, in terms of relationships, starting relationships or ongoing relationships, I don't mean everything is totally equal, that's impossible, but where you find ways of giving and receiving, I relate that to also probing or asking questions. Did you ever meet someone or get to know someone enters your life that you may like, quote unquote, you may, think they're interesting, but you find after a few times together, they're never interested in your life. They never ask. It's all about them. That's what reminds me when you say uh, givers. What'd you say? Givers and receivers. I
Yeah.
almost said givers and shakers. I don't know why I said that. Oh, shaking the salt, I guess. Uh, Giving and receiving. I like to find, not a total equality, but where there is a back and forth. I'm fine with, listening to people. I mean, it's part of what I do for my purpose in my life with coaching. It's a lot of listening, and I love that. And I don't mean to say this in coaching because it's not that kind of relationship, but in a relationship outside of coaching, I like to be asked questions. I like someone to be interested in me as well. So that's what I think of in terms of giving and receiving.
Yeah, so there's a flow, there's a back and a forth, you know,
Exactly.
and that brings in some balance there. And there are times when perhaps we're listening more because somebody has something that's really come up for them in life and they're needing that. And the other times, then they might be the ones that are doing more listening themselves. Um, but yeah, and also it kind of comes in with choice. Um, Whether people have a practice of actually making decisions in their life or they sit back and they let life make decisions for them. There's a reciprocation that we can develop with life when we recognize those opportunities. And then we get to embrace life more fully. And I think that's what we're doing, talking about in our relationships here too. When we
Right.
actually are open to those reciprocal flows of information back and forth, it makes life like technicolor instead of black and white.
Our conversation right now reminds me back in a different life that I had, different career in sales. And I had a sales consultancy business. And I represented this public relations firm once. And my job was to set up meetings. I was the giver in that sense. I would do the initial contacting of potential clients and then present them to the agency. And I did this with a variety of agencies, but this particular PR firm, something was so different. They closed on so many of these opportunities, much more than the average one agency that I represented. And finally, I started talking to the principal of this company to find out what they did with those initial meetings that I set up. And the difference was they had an agency that most of the people had a journalistic background.
Mm.
So they were probers. They
Uh,
asked questions. They didn't go to a prospect and start giving information. This is who we are. This is what we can do for you. They did it in reverse. They asked questions.
mm.
And people love that. And I don't mean to get stuck in the selling situation, but I think it relates to interpersonal relationships as well, of all types, don't you? Where
Yeah.
it needs to be reciprocal. You know, curiosity needs to be reciprocal. Interest needs to be reciprocal to really develop a close relationship, I
Yeah.
think.
And when you ask questions, then for me, it's recognizing, is there a way that I could be of service to this person in a different way as well? So being of service is different than sales, though sales, they are intended to be of service to people, and then so that it's a product that people want. And so there's just different connotations that our cultures will put on top of things. But yeah, for the purpose of our conversation here, it's really recognizing those the power of reciprocation in whatever form it is important to discern.
Right. I love that connection you just made about sales, and service,
Mm,
because they're not mutually exclusive. Really good, effective selling is serving.
yes.
You really want to find out what the need is first. You're not just,
Yeah.
forcing something. And yet we tend to think of sales that way,
Mhm.
stereotypical salesperson, But we're all selling in some way, shape, or form. We're all presenting ourselves and what we could offer, what we can do. And so probing and asking questions, I think, is really, to me, very important. Both
Yeah.
ways.
Um, yeah, it is important. I don't know, being curious, curious and interested is
Yeah,
important to me. And curiosity, I don't know, to me, it brings up a bit of playfulness, which I like that too.
yeah, I love that.
Yeah, thanks for coming out to play with me today, Coach Pete. It's fun to see where our conversations end up going and the new discoveries we get to make.
Thanks, Gloria.